This is Tell Me What It's Like, the show about life-changing decisions, extraordinary challenges, and defining moments. I'm Stacey Rain. Jahnavi Kirtane grew up in the suburbs of New Jersey. Like most places in America, her hometown was one where you needed a car to get around. Then she got the chance to attend school in nearby New York City, and she was struck by something when she got there. She wasn't nearly as independent as her peers, didn't quite get the world in the way that they did. They had been exploring their world largely on their own for years at that point, because in New York City, they didn't need a car to do it. It got her thinking about why her community was the way it was and put her on the path to her current career as an urban planner. Jahnavi, welcome to the show.
Amazing. Well, I'm so glad to be here right now. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. So thank you for having me. I think this is the time where I tell my story of kind of what got me to where I am now. And so I was born in San Francisco, and then I actually moved to Brookline, Massachusetts, which is coincidentally where I live now. It's pretty much surrounded by Boston in a very walkable place. And then I relocated to New Jersey, which is, as you said, where I grew up for most of my life, and grew up there, had a really great time, and really had a happy life, to be honest. I really enjoyed myself. My family was nearby. But I actually had the opportunity to go to high school in New York City. And when I did that, as you said, I was really struck by differences in my peers. My peers in the city were just more independent. They understood the world in a different way, I think, than I did. And I didn't exactly know why at that point. I mean, I had many theories, but I didn't really think about it in terms of car dependence at that point in my life. But it absolutely makes sense. It's a situation where my friends in the city were able to walk everywhere they wanted and needed, or they could take the subway, or they were taking a bus to school with lots of other kids. They were just interacting with more people and had the ability to get places on their own in a way that I didn't have growing up in New Jersey, where I was, at that time, I couldn't drive. And so I was largely reliant on parents or family members or friends and their parents to take me everywhere I wanted to go and hang out. And so that was just a social difference that I noticed and was really struck by. And then at my school, I had the opportunity to take this amazing semester-long program called City Semester, where all of our classes were essentially bundled in one, and all of them were about New York City.
Yeah.
And the cool thing about it was that we were able to be out in the field for multiple days of the week.
When you say in the field, like, what do you mean by that? Like, what's a place that you would go?
That's a great question. We were in the city, essentially. So, for example, for English class, we would learn about the Harlem Renaissance, and then we would actually go and tour Harlem and go to places like the Apollo Theater and talk about what we had learned actually in Harlem.
Wow.
Different opportunities like that. In science class, we got to canoe down the Bronx River and take water samples.
Oh, cool.
It was a lot of fun.
And so, I mean, just to briefly figure out what this was, would English class sort of bleed into math class and things like that when you would go out into the field?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, it depended on what project we were doing, but we had certain projects that were really interdisciplinary. So one example was we had this project where we had to create a map of something. And my group decided to look at the South Bronx, and we went to different bodegas and coffee shops and measured, I believe it was the price of a coffee cup, or it was something like that. This was years ago, so it's hard to actually remember what we were measuring, but we were measuring the price of something, and then we mapped it, and we saw how different areas had more expensive coffee and how that was correlated to changing demographics and gentrification, or I guess we were really showing how gentrification works.
Oh my gosh.
It was super cool. We
that
were
feels like
from...
Yeah, it feels like a big big concepts to help high schoolers understand, but you give them that opportunity, and clearly you guys got it.
Yes. It was super cool. And we were pulling from all sorts of different disciplines to make that happen.
Yeah.
And we were like actually going to coffee shops and asking people, they're asking the people who work there, like, how much is the price of coffee? And we were actually engaging with them, which was super cool and something that I certainly wouldn't have gotten growing up at my other school.
Yeah. So this led you to sort of a big realization in this particular class. How did that all kind of come into your mind? Obviously, it strikes me already that you go to the school and you're like, wow, these kids operate differently than me. That's a big observation for such a young kid at that point. But then this class really sort of seals the deal. Can you talk about that?
Yes. So exactly like you said, I was having these kind of personal social understandings of how space and place really matters in terms of your existence and how you live in the world and see the world and experience it. And then in the classroom, I was also learning about that dynamic in an academic sense. We did so many exercises where I was acutely aware of the ways in which our built environment that we obviously contribute to. It's a ever changing relationship, but it is a relationship, really impacts social outcomes and not just social outcomes, economic outcomes, environmental outcomes, community outcomes. I mean, it's so predictive. And that's something that I was starting to understand when I was at that age. And I really got to fully dive deep when I got to college. I studied environmental studies and American studies and was really thinking academically about how these dynamics play out. But I knew that I wanted to pursue a career in planning or something like that because planning is a field where you actually get to apply these tenets in a really real way. And you're really working in the world with space and place, but you're really doing it. You're not just talking about it in a classroom.
And is the field is called urban planning?
Yes, city planning, urban planning, and it interacts with many other fields as well. So there are lots of urban designers, there are lots of architects with whom we work. We work with a lot of engineers in terms of actually getting projects built. There are people who come to this field from all over, and I think that that's what makes it really cool. There are people with all sorts of backgrounds, public health backgrounds, people who study economics. Like, I mean, it's really interdisciplinary, but that's what keeps it really exciting because there's so many different applications and so much research as well in all of these different disciplines.
I guess I hadn't thought about that, but when I was prepping for this and looking at all the things that you guys think about, that makes perfect sense that you need all of these different disciplines to come together to think like, how can we create cities that make sense? So you work for SpecDMC. Can you talk a little bit about what you guys do?
Yes. So I work at an urban planning firm and design firm, and our single-minded goal is making more walkable places. So what does that mean? It doesn't mean that we're trying to eradicate cars.
Right.
Instead, it really means how can we make places where you don't need a car to get around? And you instead have the freedom to choose, do I drive or do I not drive? And hopefully, often, you don't have to drive. And you can instead do everything in your life. You can learn, you can live, you can shop, you can eat, you can recreate, you can worship, everything within a walkable distance.
Right.
So that's our firm, and it was founded by Jeff Speck, who is one of the most prominent city planners of our generation. He wrote this book called Walkable City, and I can talk more about that.
Yeah.
And so he's one of our co-founders, and then our other co-founder is Chris Dempsey, who has a stellar transportation background, and I've been so lucky to learn from them. They're my mentors, and it's just such a exciting place to be at SpecDMC.
Yeah, you guys are doing really cool work. I'm curious why you guys feel so strongly about making walkable places in cities. Like what, and going back to your experience of you had a different sort of You had a different experience of freedom, I guess, of independence than your peers did by the time you got to high school. What are some of the benefits that you see in your work now that you sort of think back to when you think about high school?
Yeah. I mean, there's so many benefits to a walkable place. And the other thing I'll say is if you're getting walking right, if you're getting walkability right, rather, you're probably getting a lot of other things right in a place. You're getting transit right. You're getting bike infrastructure right. You're getting housing right. But stepping back a little bit, we like to say that walkability is really good for a number of reasons. It's really good for your health.
Yeah.
Walking is really good for you, both your physical health and your social health and emotional health. We can get into that. It's really good for wealth. It's really good for local economies and property values.
Oh.
It's really good for the environment
Yeah.
because you just aren't in a car polluting as much. And there are many other reasons. Street trees are a big part of walkable places, and trees are amazing for the environment. It's really important for equity. There are lots of people who can't drive. A great example is like the elderly population. We work in a lot of communities where there are elders who are so grateful for the work that we do because it gives them freedom to do everything they need. And then the last piece that we talk about is community. When you live in a walkable place, you just are more connected to your environment and you're interacting with more people. And there are lots of studies that show that people who live in more walkable places, people who aren't commuting as much, are just more engaged in their community because they're bumping into neighbors on the street and just living in proximity to all the people with whom they interact. And so they're actually just participating more.
Yeah. It's funny. So how I found you is I was thinking about all of these things you're saying because I think this is the 11th city I've lived in. I was just trying to count it up. I think it's about
wild.
11. It's a lot. It's, part of being a military family is moving a lot. And of course, after college, I moved away to find the work that I was looking for. So I've seen a lot of the ways, cities or even just communities within those cities can be. And then I've noticed how I am because of them. Sometimes, I land in a neighborhood that's really vibrant and people are outside and, we've spent more time close to home because there's not a whole lot going on elsewhere. I've lived in cities that are very walkable that I could walk to most of those things that you're talking about. And then I've lived in cities that are not walkable at all for multiple reasons. There may not be sidewalks. There might be sidewalks, but they don't feel very safe on the road that they're on. Right. And I was thinking one day, like, how does this impact us as a community of people? And that is literally how I found you. So I was like, I'm interested in this topic. Somebody knows about this topic. And that's how you and I are talking today. Because I do think when we're in our cars all the time and not getting out of them, we don't really see each other as much. And we stop sort of talking and being a community of people together. Is that kind of what you guys find?
Absolutely. I mean, Jeff has a great quote where he says, bumping into someone in a car and on the street are two entirely different things. And it's absolutely true. When we're in all of our cars, we're so isolated. And driving can make people really upset also. Like people aren't always their best selves when they're driving. They're not as kind and they're not interacting with each other in a communal way. They're trying to get home the fastest. It's just that sort of dynamic. So we absolutely find that people who are able to walk around, and I should also say, not everyone can walk. So a rollable city is a walkable city as well. And that's really important to what we do. But we use the word walkability, but it includes rollability.
I love that word, rollability.
Yeah, exactly. But you're more engaged and you feel like your community better. You're able to. Kids are able to walk to school. Like that's a really great example that we often will talk about. Like 50, 60 years ago, half of American kids were walking to school. And now that number is below 14%.
Yeah.
It's because our schools aren't in walkable distances. It's because we have these mega schools with huge parking lots, and
Yeah.
we don't really have local schools in many places as much.
Or even when they are, like in the case of my kids right now, school is not that far away and you can technically walk to it, but it's, there's not really sidewalks in city places. It's more like you have to walk through a park, which, for older kids that might work, but for younger kids, maybe not.
Yeah.
When I say a park, I should say a forested park.
Oh, wow.
So a little bit different, but yeah, it's not like the streets are connected in a way that would make sense, or the sidewalks are connected in a way that would make sense to walk to school.
Yes.
Which is interesting.
Yep.
Why? Why are the cities like this?
It's a great question. It's a frustrating question, but I think much of it can be traced to the proliferation of the car and the highway system. So essentially, after World War II, cars were on a major rise, and federal programs funded the highway system, 41,000 miles of highways, and also millions of suburban developments or houses.
Mm-hmm.
So with those two patterns, people were just getting more and more spread out. And so eventually the merchants followed suit. They moved out to these pods of development. Town builders became real estate developers who only developed one sort of product. So instead of having a downtown with all sorts of mixed uses, as we call, so having a shop under housing, you had the office park and the suburban cul-de-sac development and the school development with like 8 athletic fields, but they were all separated. And so people had to be in a car to get there. And these places weren't built for walking. They weren't built to have connectivity and porosity, as we like to say. They were built so that you could drive. And people were doing that. And it was the new thing, and it gave them freedom. But it actually ended up limiting their freedom, because everyone now in most places in America only can get around in a car, which is just so limiting in so many ways. And like I said earlier.
Yeah. It makes me, you were describing these places, the downtown that has all these different things happening. And then you said the office park. And my mind was like, which one of those do I want to be in daily?
Yeah.
And it is not the office park.
Right.
I mean, if you just sit there and think, where are the places that I like to go? Where do I want to be? It's generally not places that have huge parking lots. Really.
Yeah.
And parking is so important. I think that's one thing you guys say a lot is, so you said earlier when we began this, it's not that you want to get rid of the car, but it's almost like smarter spaces. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's places that where we're more mindful of how we are distributing uses. And like a lot of the work we do is, well, I should say we work at all sorts of levels. So we work from the street level to the level of, we're working in Greeley, Colorado right now on 22 square miles.
Oh.
So it really runs the gamut. But what we're doing in those places where we are trying to make a new town, per se, is it's all of the same pieces that you might see in suburbia. Like we still have roads, we still have schools, we still have housing, but it's just, how is it distributed? And what we do is we try to distribute things in a walkable radius. It's about a 5-minute walk, a quarter-mile radius. And so that's how we try to design. So
when you say that, so from where people live to where they need to go, grocery, school, they're all the different places that people would go in a week. You're saying maybe a quarter, half mile?
Yeah.
And you can do that. That works.
Yes. Okay. Do you mean, in terms of asking if it works, do you mean, is it like, are we able to construct that? Or
and this is in like new sort of town developments? Okay.
So it's tricky because you know, you can't do that everywhere.
I was about to say, what about the rest of us?
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of what we do is trying to be really thoughtful about where those sorts of developments are happening. So, like we were talking about, the office park is a great example of that, or an old decommissioned shopping mall. Like these are
Yes.
places where it's a little more realistic to build a new development, or there sometimes are like greenfield properties. So places that just have not been developed that we're able to build on. But there are lots of places that aren't like that. There are lots of parking lots. You mentioned parking. I mean, parking is so hugely important to what we do. And we have a major parking surplus in this country. There are about 8 parking spots for every car in America. We have way too many parking spots. And that's a technical conversation that we don't really need to get into, but parking lots are a really prime opportunity for development. And instead of having a surface parking lot, what we can do is structure that parking. So put it in a deck.
Yeah.
And you have space to actually add housing and add a little bit of green space.
Yeah.
And have retail. Yeah.
I saw some pictures of on your website. I think you were doing a project in Florida, and it may have been like a brand new neighborhood or something.
Yeah.
And it just, it just looked like a place you want to spend time.
Yeah.
And because you could see like, oh, there's things to do here. And it's not just the place where I drive in to my house and into my garage and shut the door and go inside. Now, I'm sure there's people who might say, I don't really want that. I want to have, a mile around my house and not be around anybody else. Do you find that this vision is for everyone, or it's for most people? Like, do you think, is there research that says in general this makes people happier?
Research shows that people want this lifestyle. And if you think about it, like, walkable places are where people want to go on vacation. They're places where people want to bring their kids to go trick-or-treating.
Yeah.
We were on site visiting a town that Jeff built when he was at from called DPZ, which is hugely important in this new urbanist movement. They really started it, and they were responsible for the first new towns like this in the country. They work globally. But anyway, we were in the development and we were walking and we saw this woman sitting on a bench, and she kind of looked at us, and we were touring it with a big group, and she apologized. She said, I'm really sorry. I just like to come here to read sometimes and sit on the bench. And we were like, you don't have to apologize. This makes her day. Like, these are places where people want to go. And the other thing is that when we're building these new towns, we design for the whole range of income levels and needs. So we don't just have apartment buildings. We have all sorts of types of housing. We have row houses. We really like to emphasize the missing middle. So your row house, your townhome, your duplex, things of that nature. So we have that. We have apartment buildings. You'll see single family homes, but we really try to organize them in a way where people are together. Like, you have all sorts of people mixing.
Yeah.
But people of all income levels are able to live comfortably and afford it. And that is just so important. And there's a lot of research, some new research that just came out that shows that communities that have many income levels yield positive outcomes for everyone.
Right. Right. It makes me think about how a lot of the sort of drive further and further out, and I know Jeff talked about this when he had a TED Talk about this. It was because people were trying to find housing that was affordable to them.
Yeah. Yes.
So they had to go further and further and drive longer and longer, which, driving, as you mentioned, sometimes doesn't make us happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in these, let's say, I've got a lot of notes. I've got so many questions for you. Let's say that there's, do you guys work with mayors? I guess is my first question.
We sure do.
So do they call you up and say, hey, we're experiencing some growth. We want to make sure it's a place that people want to live? Or how do you normally hear from them?
So it really depends on the project. And I will say that Jeff served as design director for the NNA years ago. And so he also ran a program where mayors were invited and they spent days trying to solve the most pressing issues in their cities.
Oh, wow.
It was super cool. And so from that, he established many relationships with mayors. But in our work now, we work with the public sector, we work with the private sector, and it really depends on what people are interested in. So there's some places where they have a development and they need our help to design it. A lot of the work we do, however, is actually at the street level. So thinking about safety and street safety is really important to what we do.
Yeah. Deaths pedestrians aren't as safe as they used to be, right?
They are not.
I've heard about, I keep hearing, oh, there was a pedestrian hit in this city. There was one, I guess I hear about them frequently, and it feels like I hear about it more and more.
It's been growing. There are around 40,000 Americans every year who die in car crashes. It is truly an epidemic, and it doesn't get very much attention. We're so desensitized to it.
Yeah.
And often when we talk about it, we blame the driver and we blame the victim. And we don't actually think about the reasons why people are speeding and driving in unsafe ways in the first place.
Yeah.
So many streets in America are designed with the forgiveness approach. So they're designed to allow a little bit of elbow room. They're designed for speeds that are much higher than the speed that the street should carry. So what ends up happening is that people don't actually drive the speed limit. They drive the speed that they feel comfortable driving at, right? So this approach has been applied to city streets, and you have city streets that are engineered for speeds that are much higher than what they should be.
Well, yeah, I'm thinking about the straight shot street that doesn't have a lot of curves or anything around it. It's like, well, technically you can go fast.
Yeah. These are multi-lane streets, so they're one way and they're multiple lanes, and driving kind of becomes a game. These are streets with wide lanes. The typical highway lane is engineered for 12, 14 feet. Yeah. That shouldn't apply to cities. Cities should have lanes that are 10 feet. But the highway philosophy has unfortunately been applied to city streets. So you have city streets where people are speeding like crazy.
And they're also big and lots of cars on them, which makes you automatically not really want to walk on them. I don't know how to explain that.
But no, it doesn't feel safe.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel safe.
Or inviting. It's not even, it's like, well, I can't get from this place to that place easily. So why would I even try, I guess? I don't know. This is
absolutely
sort of based on my feelings about the matter. But I know that Portland is a sort of city that you guys can look to as a city that did this type of work long ago. Do I have that
sure
right?
Did.
Yeah.
They had a whole Skinny Streets initiative is what it was called. And Portland, so in terms of skinny streets, they have narrower streets, they have narrower lanes. And it's interesting because a lot of people, when they hear that, they get scared and they think that a street is more dangerous. It's the same way that research shows that if you remove a center line from a street, people drive on average 7 miles per hour slower. Which is a little bit counterintuitive to some folks, but when you think about it, it makes sense because you don't see that stripe. You feel like you have to be a little more cautious.
So is that a technique you guys use?
It sure is.
Oh,
yeah,
interesting.
So Portland has that, but they also have really small blocks, and block size is one of the most powerful predictors of walkability. Actually, when you have tight blocks, you have lots of intersections. People are more likely to walk, and they're able to enjoy the walk. It's more comfortable. It's more interesting.
More achievable.
More
Like a New York
achievable.
City block isn't, I mean, they're not that long. I mean, they're, you can think 5 blocks. It can sound really long, but it's not really in terms of how long it actually is. It's all about, it's like psychology, I guess.
A lot of what we do is psychology. It's really interesting.
Yeah. So what, some of the projects that you guys are working on, like, if you look at the range of things that you're doing or have done, what have been some of your favorites?
That's a great question. Our firm, I think I'll start with the walkability study. Our firm invented this idea of the walkability study in 2009. The city of Oklahoma City was named one of the least walkable cities in America. And their mayor called up Jeff and said, what do we do? How do we fix this? And so they embarked on the first ever walkability study. And what that essentially means is we look at all of the ways to make a place more walkable, all of the elements that contribute to it. And I think it's helpful to provide some context. We think about walkability in terms of people making the choice to walk.
Right.
And so for people that actually walk, the walk needs to be as good as the drive. And for the walk to be as good as the drive, we like to say it needs to fulfill 4 criteria simultaneously. It needs to be useful, it needs to be safe, it needs to be comfortable, and it needs to be interesting. And so in all of those criteria, there are lots of techniques that we use. But when we conduct the walkability study, we're looking at all of those levers, and we're figuring out ways to optimize the place for all of those 4 things. And there's some places, I think I said this earlier, that there are a lot of downtowns that actually are useful and comfortable and interesting. They have rich historic architecture, and they have a pretty good street network, and they have mixed uses, but they aren't safe. And so that's often where we come in. And that's been a lot of fun, because there are these, we like to call them quick build solutions. And they're really just using paint, the paint on the road where the lanes are and such. We use that to produce safer outcomes. So So going back to Oklahoma City, it is important to say that they didn't end up doing that approach. They actually had a full rebuild, but it's yielded tremendous outcomes in that city. But so it's
economic,
to say,
safety, health, all those things you named earlier.
Yes, aesthetic,
So and does it? And I know with Portland, that Jeff talked about, and again in his TED Talk, it brings people in. Like, that is where people want to live. So it in fact means growth. Is that still true? Okay.
Yes.
So did Oklahoma City, they notice that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, there are lots of quotes from people who live there who just say downtown feels so much more alive. Like, people really want to be there. We always say we try to make places where people want to go rather than just drive through.
Yeah. And the point that you made about, that's where we vacation. I was thinking about that before we talked. Like, no one's like, I want to go somewhere where I have to like drive everywhere. And it's almost harder to figure things out when you have to drive everywhere. You don't naturally walk past the coffee shop or the restaurant that you think, well, that could be a place I could go and, you know, eat or recreate or whatever. I mean, so economically, that was one of the questions that listeners were asking, is what does it do when you do build walkability into a place, or make one of these walkable spaces, as you call it? That does help sort of the property values in a place.
There's a lot of research to support that. I mean, Zillow has a walk score for a reason. Like, in real estate these days, if you look at a property, you can see that the property is often rated in terms of a walk score. Some places they have a transit score rating, and usually those 2 items are pretty correlated, but you just have so much more access. And so there are lots of places that have seen tremendous economic outcomes when you try to engineer walkability into it. And there's so many different reasons that contribute to walkability. I mentioned street trees earlier. Street trees are
Yes.
tremendous in
Tell me
terms of
about that.
helping us feel comfortable when we're walking.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
It's not just that they're
because
pretty?
not just that they're pretty, they serve as a barrier between the street and the sidewalk.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So they do protect us, and they cool our environment. I mean,
Right.
there are lots of pictures of people in parks and or on a street, and people are on the side of the street that's shady in the summertime.
Mhm.
They don't want to be out and baking in the sun.
Yeah, and there's a lot of research that, you know, even trees too can contribute to happiness and health as well,
Completely.
obviously.
Absolutely.
This makes me think about the green spaces. So
Mhm.
a lot of times people think, oh, I want to get a house in the suburbs so I can have a backyard and I can have
Mhm.
space and all these things. If you're moving into cities and more walkable cities, are you losing that green space?
That's a great question. And we like to think no, because walkable places have green spaces that are more accessible, actually. I mean, it depends on if you're in a suburban place and you have your own backyard, but they're communal spaces.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really important. There are places where there are lots of kids playing together. And in some places, those are pocket parks, so little tiny parks in a
Yeah,
neighborhood. And some
I love
places
that
they're
name.
bigger. Yeah, pocket parks are awesome. But the great thing is that you're able to interact with other folks when you're there and really build community in a way that you're just not able to when you only have your yard that's often gated,
Yeah,
or sorry, fenced in. It's just not the same environment.
right.
And the other thing to say is people often think that cities are really dirty and not so great for the environment, but if you live in a city, you have a much lower carbon footprint than people who live in a big suburban house, because when you live in a big suburban house, you have a lawn that needs to be irrigated.
Mm-hmm.
You're heating and cooling a much bigger place, and you are driving, and transportation is such an important contributor to emissions. So it's interesting. A lot of people don't actually realize that some of the greenest places are actually cities where
Yeah,
people are just not contributing to emissions in the same way.
that's super interesting. When people are given this I mean, I guess we've already sort of answered this. I'm thinking about, are people resistant to the idea of walking more? I mean, we are a country
Yeah.
built on the car. We all, like you and I both grew up. That's how we
Mhm.
got around. We've also both had the experience of living in cities that are walkable, and you can see that
Mhm.
difference. Are people resistant, and do they find that the walkability is more enjoyable at some point? Like, how does
Mhm.
that sort of transition of thought happen, I guess?
Yeah. There are a lot of people who are quite resistant.
Mm-hmm.
I think especially now with our federal government, there are lots of street safety projects that are not receiving grant funding anymore.
Mm,
A lot of what we do is under attack in many ways, and there are a lot of people who just don't understand what walkability actually means. Actually, the term walkability has become politicized in many
oh,
communities. We
really?
were working in one community and we were told that we couldn't use the word walkable in
Yeah.
any of our promotional materials because it was too polarizing,
Did you
which
change it
was
to rollability?
that's a great question.
Yeah.
I luckily was not on that project, but it's challenging right now. But I think when we start explaining what it feels like to be in that sort of place, people can come around
Or
a
when you
little
think
more.
about where you want to go on vacation and the types of cities that are
Exactly.
enjoyable, or you've mentioned to me before the conversation, you talked about college experience. So
Oh
many
yeah.
people have had that experience. Can you speak
Mhm.
a little bit about how that relates to more walkable places?
Absolutely. A lot of people with whom we work say that they haven't been lucky enough to live in a walkable place except for college.
Mm.
A lot of college campuses are structured such that you can really get around on foot or on bike in many places. And in some places, you have to take take a shuttle or a bus to get around. But there are lots of college campuses where people maybe have to drive to college and from college to get anywhere else. But once they're on campus, they are able to do everything they need in their life on campus. They're able to live close to their friends, and they're able to eat together in the dining hall and be in green spaces together where they just run into people. That was certainly what my college experience was like.
Yeah. Yeah. It's making me think you can, you can practice your religion in college. Basically they've made it to where you can do everything. It's a small sort of walkable community.
Bubble.
Yeah. That's super interesting. So if someone's listening and they think, I really wish that, listen, the place that I live right now, I wish that it were more walkable. I think there's one way to get to one restaurant. That's kind of it. That's safe. What can people do if they want to have a more walkable city outside of calling you guys and begging their mayor to get you in?
It is hard. I think that there are ways to get involved in local government and organized with your neighbors to try to make things better. A lot of communities, they all have funding that they don't need to raise in other ways to restripe their streets, like I was talking about earlier. It's literally just the paint. Yeah. And it's just a matter of where do you draw those lines? Where do you make the lanes? And so there are creative ways that we can deploy or tap into to try to make safer outcomes.
Yeah.
Sorry, what were you going to say?
Well, I was just thinking, one of the photos I saw, you had the bike lane and then the parking spots.
Yeah.
And then the lane. So and you did that all with paint. It wasn't anything else.
Yeah. Yeah. Paint can yield tremendous returns.
That's shocking.
And there's also a whole movement called tactical urbanism. It's kind of like guerrilla urbanism, if you will, where people will do various creative activities to try to create a better place themselves. So there are people who will put chairs in parking spots and kind of reclaim them. There's a whole type of mini park called a parklet, and some places really, like, this was very common during COVID. Lots of outdoor dining happened in old parking spots. So that's something that people can do, but it is tricky. But planning is increasingly and importantly becoming a much more democratized process where community members are invited to contribute to the conversation. And this wasn't always how it was. Planning was a really top-down effort prior in years past, and that has had really negative consequences for how people live now. A great example of that is the building of New York City. Robert Moses was the master planner, city builder. And he is responsible for how New York is today in its good ways and its bad ways, right? The Cross Bronx Expressway, all of the highways he really orchestrated, and there were hundreds of thousands of people who were displaced as a result. So planning has this harmful legacy, to be quite frank. And what we're doing now is trying to build a planning practice that doesn't do that so much. If you think about our society and the mental health crisis that we have, the racial stratification, socioeconomic stratification, much of that is truly a result of planning and the ways in which we built those isolated pods that only certain people could live in, and people were living in their own little bubbles, and they're driving everywhere. So that is how we got to where we are now. And now what we're trying to do is build a better practice and try to make places where people are more connected and happy.
That's amazing. It's a big responsibility. But it's a really valuable one. Well, Jahnavi, thank you so much for joining me on this show and for talking about making cities and places more walkable.
This was so much fun. I really appreciated all of your insightful questions. And I love talking about this because everyone can relate to it. It's something that all of us live. And that was very evident in your enthusiasm. So it was truly a pleasure to talk with you today.
Thanks to Jahnavi Kirtane for joining me to discuss what it's like to be an urban planner. If you liked learning about making places more walkable, please be sure to leave a review in your app. Next week, Tony King on helping people make sense of Medicare. I'm Stacey Rain. Thanks for listening.